song sheet.
Beside me and be my friend, and together we will walk in the path of Hashem. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not leave. Just walk beside me and be my friend. Together we will walk in the path of Hashem. Yay!
Okay, we can try.
So we have Oseh Shalom on the bottom left.
Yay! Oseh Shalom. Prayer for peace. It says, may the one who makes peace in the high heavens make peace upon us for all Israel and for all who inhabit here.
Yeah.
Exactly. Say Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Oh, say Shalom Bimromav, Huya, say Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Say Shalom Bimromav, Huya, say Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Oh, say Shalom Bimromav, Huya, say Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen.
lot of stuff happens there. People don't know.
Okay, so if we turn the page,
Turn the page.
Oh,
Oh, I love that song. It's my favorite song.
Yeah.
Kalam Kulo Gesher Tsar Meod Gesher Tsar Meod Gesher Tsar Meod Kol Haolam Kulo Gesher Tsar Meod Gesher Tsar Meod Ha'ikar v'ha'ikar lo lechafed lo lefached klal Ha'ikar v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal Yai dai 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 Yai dai 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 Yai dai 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 Yai dai 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 Yai dai 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 Yai dai 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 dai. Whole world is a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge. The whole entire world is a very narrow bridge. The important thing, narrow bridge. The most important thing is not to be afraid, not to be afraid. Most important thing is to not be afraid. No fear at all. The most thing is be strong and have no fear at all. Die 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 die. Die 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 die. Die 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 die. Die 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 die. Die 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 die. Woo! We needed a better translation, that's all.
thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, I can't wait till we blow the shofar.
Oh, there's another one.
Can you hear me now?
A little.
Yeah.
Now they're gonna blast it. Watch. They'll scare us.
Thank you everyone for coming. We all know why we're here. During the days of awe, the 10 days in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is a time for reflection and a time to commit to do better next year. Every year during the High Holy Days, the sound of the shofar reverberates among Jewish communities around the world. It serves as something of a wake-up call, snapping us out of the comfort of our daily routine and reminding us to examine our lives and our place in this world. It calls us to reflect upon the past year, to consider what we did well, and to commit to doing better in the future. The shofar has 3 distinct calls, which in Hebrew are called Tekiyah, Shavarim, and Truah. Tekiyah is characterized by 1 long blow, Shavarim by 3 shorter blasts, and Truah by 9 fragmented blasts. So why those specific blasts? Tekiyah represents wholeness and confidence, what we should aspire to. Shavarim demonstrates the cracks that exist below the surface of what appears to be whole. Truah is utter brokenness, a shattered blast in our shattered world. The experiences of asylum seekers in this country can only be described as broken, determined by broken policies put together by a broken system. This Rosh Hashanah, we hear the call of the shofar and are reminded of the brokenness experienced by individuals and families who come here in hopes of creating a better life. We hear their broken cries and respond with compassion. The shofar reminds us that what is broken can be fixed, and this year we aspire to achieve tikiyah, wholeness, in this broken world. So now we actually have someone here to blow the shofar for us. Matt, would you like to come and join me? If you know the blessing, I invite you to join me in saying the blessing before we hear the shofar. It's Yishma Kol Shofar. If you don't know the blessing, that's okay. You can just say Amen at the end. Ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar.
What is it?
Shvarim. Trua. Tikiyah. Shvarim. Trua. Tikiyah Gedolah.
Woo!
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
I am so glad to see all of you here. We have existed for a month. And here we are. We are officially Jewish Action San Diego. And we have a mission statement. I'm going to read it so I get it right. Mostly. We are Jewish people living in San Diego who act to fight injustice. Our core values are healing the world, saving lives, kindness and fairness and equity. We believe these values should be reflected in our American government and our society. We value a pluralistic and inclusive idea of Judaism as a religion and as a sense of identity. We value diversity both within and outside of the Jewish community. We take political action, but we are not partisan. In short, we affirm the dignity and worth of all human beings and act in solidarity with all of those who have experienced oppression and marginalization, as we have too. I want to tell you, who weren't there in the beginning, the four of us in Emily's living room, about the beginning of this group. Many of us have been involved in activism for 2 years and 3 years or longer. And many of us felt a very specific calling to this work of refugee and immigration reform. Hi, love. Here. Want to hang out? Okay. My family came here from what is now Lithuania in 1910. My great-grandfather, Joseph Miller, I can find his name on the Ellis Island registry. And my family came from a town called Slonim in Belarus. Slonim used to be 70% Jewish. In the 1910s, there was a huge exodus because of pogroms, because people were fleeing violence and persecution, because families were looking for safety and a better life. In the 40s and the 30s, there was another exodus. And now, there are no Jews left in Slonim, in Belarus. Those that weren't wiped out in the pogroms were murdered in the Holocaust, and they're gone. We feel a deep calling to this work because these are our families, because this is our story, because they tried to murder us, and we're here, and we get to eat. And so we have a responsibility to reach out to those who are being murdered, who are being oppressed, who are being caged by an unjust regime. It is our job to leave water in the desert for those who are coming behind us. because that is who we are, and that's what's important to us.
Woo!
So, with that, I think that's actually a perfect thing. Yeah. So with that, I actually want to introduce our first speaker, who is Dulce Gonzalez. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Dulce is one of the founders of Border Angels, which is an amazing organization. She's also a DACA recipient who works tirelessly for her community here in San Diego. We're so glad. Thank you. Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Dulce Garcia, and I came in 1987. I remember I was holding on with one hand to my mom, and with the other hand holding on to my older brother. And I was actually really happy because I was told that I was going to go to Disneyland. And my mom had bought me a Minnie watch, so I was really actually excited. I was about 4 years old. And we came to Tijuana, and we were robbed at the border. That was a very first experience of our border there. And then we never made it to LA County because of the checkpoint. So, I'm not going to say legal, but this is watching online. We have a double deportation force here in San Diego. We have not only ICE that constantly raise our communities, but we also have Border Patrol, and we have checkpoints set 24 hours a day coming in and out of San Diego County. And if you're a brown person, and those are pretty terrifying. So we stayed here in San Diego, and I have been undocumented ever since. 30 years later, I'm still here, I'm still undocumented. Although I do have DACA, as we know, the president. In 2017, the president rescinded the program, but we filed a lawsuit immediately. And now that lawsuit is going to the Supreme Court, so we'll be there November 12th fighting this. Wish me luck.
Woo!
Because that's what we do, right? We're resilient people, we resist, we keep at it. So we were fighting this in the courts and on the streets, much like today, right? Protesting, letting our voices be heard. But that wasn't always the case. You know, now our movement, our DACA movement specifically, we scream to the top of our lungs that we're undocumented and unafraid. The reality is, though, that has not always been the case. Growing up here in San Diego County during the Prop 187 era, when I was being told as a child that I deserved to be in a classroom, I was not screaming undocumented and unafraid. Luckily, the Supreme Court got that case right to fire and said every single child deserves an education, whether Steve Miller knows about our laws or not. That is the case. And we do have human rights that protect us. Also, growing up in San Diego County, even politicians that were Democrats were calling me a welfare child and calling my parents criminals. And that's how we came about the laws that right now make 5 million of us still undocumented out of the 11 million in this country. Those policies that came about from a language of hate being used in the 90s made its way to the Congress, and now we're still living with those ramifications. So I urge every single one of you to please watch out for the language that we use when referring to one another. What we saw in El Paso is just a result of the hateful rhetoric that's coming from this administration that sometimes is even felt by our own neighbors. So I urge you to be kind to one another no matter what religion we practice, no matter how we look like, where we came from, or where we're headed. Let's just be kind to one another, because hateful language does translate to hateful acts, and we saw that in El Paso, and we have been feeling it for a long while, and it's amplified by this administration. My own family has suffered family separation. You know, speaking of language that we use, when I was in high school, trying to figure out where I was going to be going to college, my own school counselor told me I was an illegal immigrant and I wasn't going to go anywhere, not even across the street to the community college here in San Diego. But obviously, being stubborn, I was like, you watch me. You watch me do this. And I went and enrolled into the community college that same summer, and then eventually graduated from UC San Diego and then went on to law school.
Woo!
But it was in 2006 when my own brother who is a year younger than me. And he was in high school playing sports and being the life of the party. He was a jokester. He was always smiling. And he would tell me to walk 5 feet ahead or 5 feet behind because he was too cool for me. I was a nerd in high school. And, you know, his hair was always on point. His shoes, his clothing, everything was always on point. He was always happy. Then he was stopped by a police officer in a regular stop. I believe racially profiled. He was turned over to ICE. When he was turned over to ICE, he was transported 100 miles from here to the desert. And he was given a jumpsuit. He was given tennis shoes that didn't have shoelaces so that he wouldn't attempt suicide. When I risked everything to go see him in that detention center, I saw him behind a glass window and my spirit was just broken. He wasn't smiling. I could tell he had been crying, but he was trying to keep it together for me. He was no longer my brother. He had been assigned a number. He was no longer by his name. He was a booking number. He was an alien registration number from there on. And that image of my brother behind the glass window changed me. And we were confused. We didn't know why after so many years of being in this country, we were now facing family separation. My brother speaks broken Spanish. He came here at the age of 3 with me. And this is all we know. This San Diego has been our home for so long. And here we were not understanding our family situation. So that's when I decided to practice immigration law. I needed to learn the ins and outs of immigration law. And what I learned has been heartbreaking. You see, even now, after so long, instead of making progress, it seems like sometimes we take steps back. Just when we think we've figured things out and we're going in the right direction, we take a few steps back. Whereas now we have the most vulnerable people knocking on our doors and we rejected them. We have 10,000 asylum seekers in Tijuana. In 31 of the shelters, none of them receiving any help whatsoever from the U.S. government or the Mexican government. 31 shelters sheltering 10,000 people that have asked for our help, that have traveled thousands of miles with our families, and we have told them to wait in line on an average about a year in the most dangerous city in the world. And that's not my opinion. They go by the murder rate. And the desert's right there. And a lot of people get tempted to cross that desert. Now this is San Diego, it's nice weather right here. But in the desert, it easily gets over 115 degrees in the summer. And we have seen the change of migration patterns where now we find little kids' jackets, little kids' shoes. We know people are crossing with families, with kids. The murder rate by the Border Patrol officially ended in September 2018 for that year. The last fiscal year was 283. These are bodies that have been recovered. So many more bodies are still in the desert waiting to be recovered. Since Operation Gatekeeper in '94, when the walls went up, we've had over 10,000 deaths. Over 10,000 deaths. And we keep pushing people to the desert. And now to our salty desert as well, the ocean, right? People are drowning in our oceans, in our rivers. And we still reject people that are asking for our help. How can we deny water when someone is crossing the desert? At that point, the water that Border Angels puts in the desert becomes life-saving water. Yet other folks are shooting other jugs of water, using them as target practice, going around and exposing the water so that it's no longer good. That's just malicious. Because people that are crossing the desert are so desperate to survive, so desperate at a chance to live, that when they get to our water, it really is life-saving water. Yet some folks feel compelled to mess with those. We have to do better. We have to do better with the language that we use, and it starts on our day-to-day. It starts with the way we treat our neighbors, our classmates. It starts with us. And we hope that then that gets to the higher-ups, right, to the president, to the chief of Border Patrol. The chief of Border Patrol, very proudly, when he talks about how he trains his agents, he talks about the invasion of the other. He talks about waking up in the middle of the night and having a stranger in your kitchen. That is not what's happening on our border. There isn't an invasion of people. There are people desperate to survive that are knocking on the doors asking for help. But when the Border Patrol, the chief, trains its agents to have fear of the other, we can only speculate what happens in the middle of the night when no one is looking and these agents are armed. How empowered are they? When no one is holding them accountable, when no one is looking, when we don't have access to the cages, to the detention centers that Border Patrol runs, now none of us have access to. Even as an immigration attorney, I have limited access to what happens in a detention center. We should end the cages. Stop all the concentration camps. It's time that we stop all of the concentration camps. People are profiting from this. Civil corporations are profiting from the pain that our folks are suffering. It's time that we put an end to it. It's going on for far too long. It's gone for far too long, and we should stop it. Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you. Which brings us so this is why we are here today. There's a few reasons, but today we are calling specifically to defund hate, to defund CBP, to defund ICE. Because maybe this isn't the party line, but I can think of a word to describe a security patrol, law enforcement agency with no oversight, with too much money, that operates in secret, that keeps children in cages, that lets children die of diseases that they could be vaccinated for rather than offer flu shots. I can think of a thing we could call that organization, and I'm pretty sure we shouldn't be giving them any of our tax money, and I'm pretty sure that I'm only following orders is not an excuse for anybody in that building. So here's what we want, and here's what we're going to demand from Congress. We oppose increasing funding for ICE and CBP. They do not need a dime more money to torture children and families. We want them to cut their money. We demand that our Congress cuts funding for CBP and ICE. And we demand more oversight so there's no shuffling of funds around, taking money from FEMA, taking money from organizations that actually support families and children to fund cages instead. These are our demands. And later, we're going to give you all an opportunity to sign on to these demands and to send postcards, because we really, truly can make a difference. Right here in San Diego, our congressional delegation matters, and we can push them to vote the right way. So I'm going to hand it over to Gretchen now to introduce our next speaker. Yeah.
So I wanted to introduce my friend and someone that I admire so much. Mary Lehman is also an immigration attorney. She's also a medic. She's worked in refugee camps all over the world, and she's going to speak on her experience. She is a fighter. She is just a voice for the voiceless, and this is Mary Lehman.
Woo!
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you everyone for coming here today. It's important that we all show up and we continue to use our voice in either way, because if we don't, we're complicit, and I think we all know that. That's why we're here. Asylum seekers are here at our doorsteps because they are in danger of dying, and truly worse than dying, in their home countries. I've helped women at our border who are raped in front of their children, men with scars across their faces, and brains permanently destroyed due to torture. I've cried listening to young girls who are pursued and slashed with knives for simply trying to protect their family. And what do? We torture them. We imprison them. We taunt them, and we deny them food and water and basic sanitation, sometimes until they die at our own American hands. We also commit psychological torture. Guards in detention centers tell mothers they will never see their children again. Guards tell men they will be sent home to die without ever seeing an attorney or having a day in court. You know what separates us from the terrible countries we love to vilify? Law. Due process under the law. So we are illegally denying our brothers and sisters here in the U.S. on U.S. soil due process under the law. For example, an asylum claim must be filed in English, but those in detention centers are denied even a translation of the asylum application. And if they don't file an asylum application within a few months, they will be deported. Deported without a court hearing, without a chance to even open their mouths, explain the danger, and make their asylum claim. A right that is their right under law. A law as old and humane as sanctuary in caves during the Bronze Age. Most frustrating to me is asylum seekers do not have access to attorneys. If you do not have an attorney, you will almost definitely lose your case. The odds of winning asylum or even getting your case heard without attorneys are about 5%. This is what makes the MPP, the Remain in Mexico program, so unconscionable, and perhaps intentionally so by our administration.
Perhaps.
How can you find and meet with an American asylum attorney if you're in Mexico, if you're there living on the streets with no address? It's hard enough to find an attorney here in the U.S. And just so you know, we are almost all volunteers. Every single asylum attorney that I have met, they do this out of their goodness of their heart. No one is making money doing this. And there's not enough of us. I just started doing this like a year and a half ago because I needed to do it. Another terrible denial of due process, and I'm going to say it right here in front of this building, is that the asylum immigration judges are not true independent judiciary branch judges.
Well,
they are appointed by the executive branch. They are appointed by Trump's office. The reality is that the judges are not independent, but they usually act like the adversary of the person seeking asylum. They often belittle and try to trick and confuse the person on the witness stand that is suffering trauma and recounting in explicit detail all the terrible things that happen to them. Have we lost ourselves? We are nothing if we are not a nation of laws, a nation of due process. We are lost now on a sea of hate and fear. How we are treating asylum seekers violates our national law and international law. After World War II, we signed international treaties that never again will we turn away those fleeing for their lives without due process, without the chance to show that they will be killed or tortured if they are not given sanctuary on our shores. But we have become the torturer, not sanctuary. We have become the evil and not the righteous. And let me be clear, I'm not asking for our borders to be wide open or cease to exist. What we are asking for is our United States laws of sanctuary, laws of asylum, laws of human rights be followed, be respected, or we are nothing. We are a country of laws. We must be, or we are nothing but institutions of terror and the evil we deign to despise. We have become the monster. But I believe it's not too late, that good people like you and me, that are here today, and our friends, we know better. We are the true Americans, the true patriots, that will return our good country to its ideals of equality, and justice for all. So don't be silent. Keep being involved. Keep showing up. Thank you.
Woo! Woo! More. Yay.
Hi all, my name is Sarah. I am an organizer with Jewish Action San Diego. Woo! I have a little speech prepared. So the high holidays, and especially the 10 days of repentance between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are a time of mourning people who have died in the past year, collective soul searching, accountability, waking up, and committing to act for more justice in the years to come. As I look back to this time last year, I think about the experiences I had while volunteering at the migrant shelter here in San Diego, and the beautiful way in which our entire community responded to the humanitarian crisis at our border. ICE had just ended their safe release program, and after being processed through the port of entry, families with children were being dropped off by ICE officials on the streets of San Diego. They were disoriented, tired, hungry, and sometimes ill. This community stepped up and contributed in ways big and small while the news rattled on with Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. We were on ground zero. We are on ground zero. Nonprofits, legal advocates, nurses, and doctors were donating their time, resources, and expertise. Everyday people were providing food, donating clothes and hygiene items, transporting folks to the airport or hospital, and giving of their financial resources. There was chaos, yet human kindness shone through. The most important act we were doing was meeting these families' basic needs at their most vulnerable moments. By witnessing their journey, we could understand our common humanity. I remember walking a mother and her son to the Pizza Hut near one of the shelters to meet up with their sponsors, the child's grandmother, whom he had never met. As we were walking along the residential street lit with Christmas lights, the mother told me that for 3 months her son was separated from her while she sat in detention. She didn't know where he was or what had happened to him. She began to cry. As we walked and her son admired the Christmas lights, I said, "You are free now," together. I then watched the family as they reunited, tears running down their faces. An interesting story is that the shelter is now virtually empty. So this story is my family's story. The story of taking an unknown journey in search of safety and a better life. My grandparents came to the US from Russia during the time of pogroms and from Europe after losing all their family in the Shoah and surviving the death camps. The difference was that when they came to America, they were welcome and given opportunities to start fresh. My father's family settled in Pittsburgh before they made their way to LA. It broke my heart when I heard the news of the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. The place where my family found refuge was now a place of terror, targeted just because they were Jewish, just because they supported immigrants. I also vividly remember being at a nearby synagogue when I heard the news of the shooting in Poway. This administration's white nationalist agenda, which includes anti-immigrant policies, emboldens anti-Semitism and hate in our own community. I am saddened by the events of the past year, perhaps even traumatized. Despite the darkness, I see the light every day in the resilience of those that are fighting for freedom, in those that choose to offer their support, and in actions like this one, where we stand proudly Jewish and in support of our immigrant brothers and sisters. We remember how our migration stories for safety and freedom are bound up in theirs. Their fight is our fight. Their pain is our pain. Their liberation is our liberation. And with that, I invite Bruce and Brian up to help me in recounting the names of those who have died in ICE custody from the past year as we perform our Yisker service.
These are the names of the people who have died in ICE and CBP custody since the last Rosh Hashanah. Marie Juarez.
age 2. Darlene Valle, age 10.
Wilfredo Pedron, age 58.
Merjansana Amar, age 40.
German Volkov, 56.
Felipe Gomez Alonso, age 8.
Jacqueline Qual Maclin, age 7.
Abel Reyes Talente, 54.
Juan De Leon Gutierrez, age 16.
Carlos Gregorio Hernandez Vasquez, age 16.
Wilmar Josue Ramirez Vasquez, age 2.
Simrat Pal Singh, age 21.
Johanna Medina Leon, age 25.
Yimi Alexis Valderramos Torres, age 30.
Pedro Arrigo Santoya, age 44.
Roberto Rodriguez Espinosa.
Nabane Awine, October 1st, held at Otay Mesa.
We also honor the memory of those killed by white supremacist terror, whose actions were emboldened by this administration, including the 11 victims of the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh on October 27, 2018, as well as Lori Gilbert Kay, age 60, of Poway, in the Poway Chabad shooting on April 27, 2019. Together, we can wake up the members of Congress to their responsibility to stop human rights abuses by ICE and CBP this year. We remember those who were killed for seeking safety. We remember the crimes of ICE and CBP. We remember the members of Congress who enabled Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. And we remember our vision of a future where all immigrants are welcome and safe. And with that, we'll say the Kaddish, the Mourner's Kaddish, which you can find on your song sheets. I don't know what page it's on. So does everyone? What page is it on? 4. On page 4. Yid Gadol. On the song sheet? Okay, it's on the second page. The Mourner's Kaddish.
Here we
you can
go.
say it with me. Yid Gadol v'Yid Kadosh Shnei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'yamechon u'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'me'almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudashah b'richu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiram be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei shalom b'mamav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May their memory be a blessing.
Amen.
Amen. With that, Gretchen will lead us with our Shamnu.
This year, we name the sins and transgressions that we are collectively responsible for, that uphold the unjust and violent immigration system. When we cast off these sins, we are not casting off responsibility. Instead, we name these sins and cast them away. In the new year, we will collectively make profoundly different choices. As Americans, we have allowed our government to incite fear and divide our communities. We have been too timid to stand in solidarity with all immigrants. We have closed ports of entry to all but a few asylum seekers each day. We have deported hundreds and thousands of people each year. We have ended TPS for migrants from Syria, Somalia, and Yemen. We have forgotten our history. We have given excuses. We have helped corporations like GEO Group and Core Civic profit from immigration detention. We have increased ICE's budget. We have justified cruelty by appealing to the law. We have kept nearly 500,000 people in ICE detention centers over the past year. We have limited detained migrants access to attorneys, and we have made it harder to get a green card if you are not wealthy. We have normalized the white nationalism inherent in our immigration system. We have observed countless horrors at the border and became numb. We have permitted Islamophobia to go unchallenged. We have quipped that people with no path to legal immigration status should just get in line. We have ripped families apart through workplace raids. We have separated families at the border and all across the U.S. We have terrorized DACA recipients who live in a constant state of fear and anxiety. We have urged patience and compromise when we should have pushed harder. We have vilified Trump without examining our own complicity in his agenda. We have waited too long to speak out against our country's detention and deportation machine. We have witnessed xenophobic response against immigrants, and our only response is never again. We have yielded when we should have resisted, and we have zeroed in on just defeating Trump without also working to dismantle the institutional racism that remains in our country.
How's everyone doing?
We're good.
Awesome.
Good. Thanks for bearing with us in the hot sunlight, hot October sun. We come together for a recommitment for our values as members of the Jewish faith, as members of the Jewish community, and as Americans. Our tradition teaches us that teshuvah, to return, happens when we are faced with the same challenge or situation, but instead make a different choice. The way that our members of Congress can show atonement for their part in the harm that ICE and CBP have caused is to lift up their voices and cast their votes for justice and compassion, to cut funding for ICE and CBP and hold these agencies accountable. And yes, federal building, we're looking at you. So we come together as part of a national defund hate movement. And the demands of the defund hate movement are that in the upcoming government funding fight, we call on our San Diego County representatives to be a champion for immigrant families and their children by opposing any appropriations package that increases funding for ICE and CBP, supporting significant funding cuts in an appropriations package for these agencies, and increasing oversight and accountability by removing their transfer and reprogramming authority to take money directed to other parts of DHS like FEMA or their own agencies to use for additional detention and deportation activities. So when I say defund, you say hate. Defund.
Hate.
Defund.
Hate.
When I say We stand with, you say immigrants. We stand with.
Immigrants.
We stand with.
Immigrants.
And we make a commitment here and now that we will continue this fight into the new year. And that we call on our representatives to do the right thing and stand up for our shared values. And we can do it. So we call upon everybody to sign our poster that we will deliver to our representatives, to sign the postcards that we will deliver to our representatives, to keep making your phone calls and your emails to your members of Congress, your representatives and your senators all year long. And if you'd like, continue to be part of Jewish Action San Diego, because that's what we're here to do. And we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo!
Another traditional prayer that we say on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is the prayer for our country. I found an alternative prayer for our country, one that's a little bit more relevant for us gathered here today, written by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen. So I'm going to read it out loud. Our God and God of our ancestors, bless this country and all who dwell within it. Help us to experience the blessings of our lives and circumstances, to be vigilant, compassionate, and brave. Strengthen us when we are afraid. Help us to channel our anger so that it motivates us to action. Help us to feel our fear so that we do not become numb. Help us to be generous with others so that we raise each other up. Help us to be humble in our fear, knowing that as vulnerable as we feel, there are those at greater risk, and that it is our holy work to stand with them. Help us to taste the sweetness of liberty, to not take for granted the freedoms won in generations past or in recent days, to heal and nourish our democracy, that it may be like a tree planted by the water, whose roots reach down to the stream. It need not fear drought when it comes. Its leaves are always green. Source of all life, guide our leaders with righteousness. Strengthen their hearts, but keep them from hardening, that they may use their influence and authority to speak truth and act for justice. May all who dwell in this country share in its bounty, enjoy its freedoms, and be protected by its laws. May this nation use its power and wealth to be a voice for justice, peace, and equality for all who dwell on earth. May we be strong and have courage, to be bold in our actions and deep in our compassion, to discern when we must listen and when we must act, to uproot bigotry, intolerance, misogyny, racism, discrimination, and violence in all its forms, to celebrate the many faces of God reflected in the wondrous diversity of humanity, to welcome the stranger and the immigrant, and to honor the gifts of those who seek refuge and possibility here, as they have since before this nation was born. Let justice well up like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. And let us all say together, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming.
Woo!
So now, at least one of us needs a snack, or there's going to be quite a meltdown in a second. So we brought snacks because, of course, we did. So we have challah and honey